his expertise knowledge on in silicon tools for rational drug design. With this brief note, I heartily welcome today's speaker, Dr. Murli Krishna Kumar.
Share my expertise in computer drug designing with all of you. And I am a proud alumnus of Bapatla College of Pharmacy. We belong to first batch students. And I'm really happy to be associated with my alma mater in this activity. And before initiating our talk, I just would like to share you a few things which made me to go into the computer-aided drug designing, and then why it is really significant for faculty like you and me. I suppose this is a faculty development program. Okay, so here why computer-aided drug designing is essential for each one of us involved in one or the other way of drug designing or drug development or product development, etc. And then what are all the tools that we have? The next one is, in many of the cases when I am interacting with my colleagues or my junior students, etc., they used to say that we don't have this, we don't have that for research work. Computer drug designing is one such field where you can have everything provided you have a computer and a little bit of knowledge. So with that, you can improvise your teaching, improve and add a lot of value to your research work, and increase significantly the impact of your research work while publishing it. So with that in my mind, with that objective to tell you all how we have done something which gave us a lot of productivity. So here I am sharing one of my research work which has recently concluded. So the title of my talk is In Silico Tools for Rational Drug Design, Gene to Lead a Case Study. Okay, so here, because we are attempting to do research work, so here we have chosen a disease which is almost like a neglected kind of a disease. So that is tuberculosis. So in case of tuberculosis, this is one of the major leading cause of death because of infectious diseases. And you all knew that tuberculosis, nobody talks about tuberculosis right now because we have so many drugs are there. But when drugs are there, why are we pursuing for new drug discovery? Okay, still you can see the figures which were recorded in 2019 itself. Around 10 million people around the globe got tuberculosis and 2.7 million people affected in India. And though we have the resumes like DOTS therapy is there, okay, directly observed tuberculosis therapy is there, where INH, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, superb drugs. And right now, though we are suffering also from drug-resistant TB because of the misuse or abuse or overuse of irrational use of antibiotics, the microbes are developing resistance. So though for some of the drug-resistant tuberculosis strains, we do have drugs like bedaquiline, delaminid, and protominid, and a few other drugs were there which are replaced, which were either entering into the field newly or they were repurposed. Okay, so though we have all these, still we need drugs. Okay, but the problem here is, this is it. The major problem is every tuberculosis patient will be given with multi-drug therapy. Minimum of 4 drugs will be there. For a patient who got exposed to a TB patient in a preventive mode, the fellow will be given with isonicotinib acid hydrozide, INH only will be given. But when somebody is declared as a TB patient, they will receive a minimum of 3 drugs. And the second problem is multi-gram dosage. If you take INH alone, if you are 70 kg, you will receive a minimum of 500 milligram twice daily. Okay, so those dosages are tuned right now, but on an average, a patient will be asked to take a minimum of 1.5 to 2 grams of drugs per day, including all these 3 drugs or 4 drugs. The second one is very, very, very long treatment period. You will be surprised if I say that with INH alone, INH, rifampicin, and ethambutol alone, you can have strain negative. means when you give this formulation to a patient, within 1 week to 10 days time, the sputum will become strain negative because you don't find the TB strain anymore. But as you all knew, TB sleeps inside our body, inside macrophages, inside the bone marrow, inside the lipophilic tissues. So we need to kick them out of our system. So that's the reason why we don't take chances. So we give drugs in such a manner that the microbial load inside our body is minimized significantly. So a minimum of 3 months for drug susceptible therapy, and it will go more than 2 years for drug resistant therapy. The next one is, as you are exposed to multiple drugs for so many years, so many days, what will happen? Drug induced toxicity will surface. Let's say if you have an antibiotic in the resume like ciprofloxacin or something like that, then what will happen? It is going to kill or alter your internal microbial flora. That is going to reflect on your health. Second one is, the drugs like ethambutol, INH and rifampicin are known hepatotoxic drugs. Then what to do? You cannot avoid it. So the patients will be asked to monitor their liver health over a period of time. Okay. So because of these reasons, what will happen is the patients quite often, because there is no cough, there is no problem is there after 15 days treatment, then the patients usually discontinue the therapy. Once they discontinue the therapy, the microbes that are still there inside their body, they will become resistant. Okay, so patient non-compliance is again major problem. So what is it that we need? Less number of drugs, less weight, shorter treatment period, no toxicity. So these are the 4 objectives that we have for any TB drug research institute throughout the world. These are the objectives which we pursue. Okay, so what is the solution? So all we need is a safer, potent, novel drug. Why do we need a safer drug? No toxicity. It must be potent so that less dosage is sufficient. It must be novel. What do you mean by novel? Both structure need to be novel. Mechanism of action also need to be novel. Quite often it goes hand in hand. If you choose a completely novel chemical structure, there is a more possibility that mechanism of action can also be different. It means like when we take penicillins and cephalosporins, they share some commonality in their chemistry as well as mechanism of action. Okay, beta-lactam ring is there, through that they are acting. But you cannot compare penicillin with rifampicin. Okay, so their chemistry is entirely different as well as their mechanism of action is also entirely different. So in that way, we need novel structure and novel mechanism of action so that you can get a patent and exclusivity on your product. So these are all some of the objectives you need to keep at the back of your mind while designing a project. So here, okay, let it be, it's a novel drug, okay, that's fine. So why can't we simply get so many chemical structures that are already synthesized and screen it for anti-TB activity? Is it really possible? The main problem here everybody is facing is difficulties in development of drugs. So recently, we have seen in case of COVID, okay, vaccine approval itself needed, okay, years together. But whatever vaccines that are going to come to the market or which are already entered into the market, they were all approved because we don't have any other choice. Even in that case also, they are going through a series of screening protocols, which is really expensive. Okay, and you need so many approvals. Okay, you have also seen this one. Ramdev Babaji, their Corona kit or something like that, Coronil. It was rejected because in the beginning it was rejected as a corona medicine because it was not approved in that category. Now it is entering into the market as a nutraceutical to immunopotentiator. Okay, you have to be very careful. So here in classical drug discovery, maybe you might have already seen this one, the rate of attrition. If you choose 5,000 to 10,000 molecules in a database, okay, if you have these many molecules, and if you go to preliminary screening, in vitro, in vivo, 250 molecules can have the possibility of showing drug-like properties. Among which, if you also let it go through some of the toxicity screens, etc., and different models of bioactivity screening, then probably 5 molecules will only enter into the clinical trials. And among which, you may or may not see one drug approved by FDA. Okay, it will happen only if you are lucky. Okay. So if you are really good at project designing in the beginning itself, then all these things can happen and you can see some money, see some product in the market. So how many years? Altogether, it will take approximately 6 to 12 years. 6 to 12 years. So here, what is happening is 6 to 12 years it is taking, and so much of money is needed. But if, let's say, in case of corona, if we wait for a drug to come, it will take about 12 years. Okay, then who will remain on earth? Nobody would be there to even see the drug. Okay, so that's the reason why we have to increase the speed at which the research work is going on. See, if you see here in the preliminary screening itself, we are spending 3 to 6 years. 3 to 6 years. Most of this goes into design of drug, synthesis or isolation, screening. Okay, so let's say if you take one molecule and if you let it go through anti-inflammatory screening, maybe you all are aware of the rat paw edema method. Okay, so if you let it go through that one, you need to buy maybe 12 rats, 6 rats in one batch, 6 rats in another batch, acute toxicity studies you have to do, and then for every rat you have to do so many things, doses, giving doses, and then evaluating it. You need to employ a pharmacologist there, you need to employ somebody over there, you need to take permissions. For a single drug you have to spend at least 5,000 rupees, and it takes at least 10 days to screen one drug for at least 1 or 2 concentrations. Imagine screening 5,000 drugs or 10,000 drugs. So why are we screening like this? Because we don't have any idea on how to pre-screen it. How to pre-screen it. Okay. Let's say if somebody gives you an apple and a chocolate, you can easily decide which one you can put it in your pocket. Okay. Because you are aware of the pocket size, you are aware of the size of the apple, you are aware of the size of the small chocolate, 5-star chocolate. But we don't have any idea on how actually our body is working. So that's the reason why we want, if you wanted to take chance and take 5,000 molecules and screen it, then you would end up in spending 3 to 6 years. So much of attrition will be there. So this is the reason why people from Pfizer, like Lipinski, Professor Lipinski, and many others, they came forward in bringing some kind of knowledge-based decision systems into this phenomenon. Okay, into this field. So here comes again the development of mathematical tools, computational tools, so that we can pre-screen. Means out of the 5,000, we use some computational tool, some computational program which is dependent on a robust statistical methodology, so that preliminary screening will be done. Just like the example I gave you, I'll give you a chocolate, a biscuit, and a big apple, etc., etc. By just looking at it, you will decide which one can fit into your pocket, which one can fit into your bag. Okay, because you already have everything in your brain. So in the same way, a computer is like that. If you teach it how to do something, it can do it in a dependable manner, in a pretty quick manner, and it doesn't require any money. Okay, what it needs is only power. Okay, completely power, and then appropriate feed of data. That's the only thing that is needed. So with that brief intro, we opted for computational tools to avoid this one because we don't have this much time. 3 to 6 years is too much for us. So we wanted to use some computational tools so that we can go ahead with the research work. So here, as you all knew, the title here is selection of a protein. Why I'm choosing a protein? We all knew in medicinal chemistry, let's say for whatever bioactivity that you can see, whatever bioactivity, you will see a series of biochemical events. Biochemical reactions will happen. Let's say adrenaline is more in your body, then obviously you will see high BP. Okay, or more beta receptors are there, overactivity is there, overexpression of beta receptors is there. So for any kind of physiological function, there will be some kind of a biochemical backup will be there. In case of biochemical events, who are working? An enzyme will be working in a biochemical pathway. A receptor like a GPCR will be there. GPCR or any enzyme will be there, which is actually doing some kind of work there. Okay, so that's the reason why. If you have some kind of a problem, biological activity is to be obtained, we need to explore the biochemistry behind it, means molecular pharmacology behind it, and then identify an enzyme or a receptor, key receptor. By tuning that, we should be able to achieve the biological action, okay, physiological event, whatever we wanted to do. Like IBP is there, beta 1 blocker. If you give, the BP can be controlled, or if you give a diuretic, you can reduce it. No, urine formation in one or the other way, you can tune it, ACE inhibitors, etc., etc. All of them have the biochemical basis behind their drug development. In the same way, whenever we wanted to solve any disease-like activities, we choose a protein. So in this case, we are attempting Mycobacterium tuberculosis. This is a chemotherapy, means we are trying to kill the pathogen. When you're trying to kill the pathogen, we need to have all biochemical events that are happening inside the microbe, and some of the targets are already explored, and we can choose some other pathways that are over there, which are novel, which are essential. If you switch off that pathway, like in case of bedaquiline, okay, it is almost like cyanide poisoning. Okay, bedaquiline switches off F1 F0 ATP synthase, but it is selective to TB. So that's why bedaquiline became one of the most potent drug as far as other than INH. INH is the most potent drug as far as human activity is concerned. Other than that, bedaquiline is the next highest potent drug that is available in the market. Okay, so here we have ATP synthase as the novel target. Like that, you can go through the literature or the resources that are available, bioinformatic resources that are available, choose an enzyme which is critical for the survival of the microbe, and from there you can start your research work. Now let's see how we have done our case study. So whenever we have a disease, check the disease, biochemistry of disease. So we do here comparative biochemical analysis. In healthy situation, what is there? Disease condition, what is there? So when you are trying to discover an antibacterial or antimicrobial antiviral drug, the biochemistry of the virus or bacteria and biochemistry of humans, we wanted to selectively attack only the pathogen, biochemistry of the pathogen. Then identify the target, then obtain the gene or protein data, and then perform NMR or XRD, crystallography techniques will be there. Three-dimensional protein structure can be obtained. Because in case of computer-aided drug designing, three-dimensional structure of protein is very important. Why it is important, I will tell you in the next coming slides. Okay, so I hope I made myself clear here. Then once the receptor is or a protein is identified, then you have to identify the receptor pocket, because in a big protein like an enzyme, small area will be there which is actually responsible for activity of an enzyme. Now you have to find out that. So here again, gene or amino acid sequence, and normally this is what happens. Gene expression means in E. coli or something like that, and then protein will be produced, and then that protein will be taken because it's an enzyme. You develop an assay for that and confirm its activity. Then mutation studies will be done, because we have a database of proteins and their receptor sites. Okay, so then we can pick up the enzymes that are there at the probable receptor pocket and mutate. So when you mutate an amino acid with another amino acid at the active pocket, the activity of an enzyme will be completely lost. Completely lost. So one second, there is a technical problem here. One second. Okay, so here what is happening? We are performing the assay and then we are confirming it. So once you confirm, yeah, once you confirm, assay confirmation is done, then you take a compound and the either inhibitor, known inhibitor, or a known substrate, and a co-crystallize. So here what exactly is happening is, let's say this is the protein, okay, for which by a receptor pocket we don't know. So what we will do is we choose an inhibitor and mix them together and crystallize it. And while crystallization, what will happen is, this is the protein. So inhibitor is over here. Inhibitor is over here. So we knew right now this is the active pocket. Okay. So this is one way how you can identify through X-ray crystallography technique the active pocket. Okay. Or through mutation studies also you can find what is the probable region where active pocket can be there. Because all the time proteins cannot be crystallized. Proteins cannot be crystallized. Like transmembrane proteins like GPCRs will be there. GPCRs cannot be crystallized. Okay, so like that. So whenever we are able to crystallize a protein, we can get easily the receptor pocket information. The next one is, let's say if the protein cannot be crystallized, then how can we know the three-dimensional structure? What we have is only either amino acid sequence or gene sequence. We don't have any other information. Then go to the take the help of bioinformatic tools. Okay, bioinformatic tools like BLAST analysis, where you can use online tools. You don't have to buy any software, nothing is needed. Only thing is you need to know the technique. BLAST analysis you can do. From there, it will probably give you various types of proteins or genes which were already studied. And then from the templates that we are getting from the literature, we can do one technique. We call it as a homology modeling. Homology modeling means here we have amino acid sequence, and when we are searching it, just like Google search, okay, if you click any hero or heroine name or a drug name, it gives you all types of information with the prioritization. Okay, so here let's say if you give amino acid sequence to this BLAST tool, because it has its own logic of searching for an amino acid sequence that is already reported. Then it will give you all information regarding earlier reports of similar proteins which were reported with a three-dimensional structure. Three-dimensional structure. This is very, very important. So to tell you a small nature secret, normally for any protein or amino acid, for any protein with an amino acid sequence, if two proteins are having similar amino acid sequences, then both will contain similar three-dimensional structures. There will be redundancy. In the proteins that we have, in the enzymes we have, a small portion will be there which is responsible for the bioactivity. What about the remaining area? It gives structural stability. Okay, that structural stability is coming from more than 45% of the portion of the enzyme. So that's the reason why there is one calculation where scientists found that you can have approximately 45 to 50% of redundancy in the three-dimensional structure of any of the proteins. Okay, so that is the principle which we use here. The homology modeling can be done. From there, protein three-dimensional structure can be obtained. So all these, obtaining a template, obtaining a gene or amino acid sequence from internet. What we need is a computer, or right now you can use your mobile phone also. Blast analysis is done on a computer. Templates are obtained by using internet resources. Homology can be done by using either online tools, or you can download free softwares, modeler like softwares are there. If you have a computer with 4 GB, 8 GB RAM is really good. 4 GB RAM is also fine. 1 GB graphics card and Windows 10 or whatever systems that we are having right now, they are more than enough to do this experiment. Once the homology is done, you evaluate the protein, and the protein three-dimensional structure is obtained. From here, you can use online tools again. Again, software tools are available freely. So if you pay, if you are ready to purchase, then all these will be stitched together so that in a single GUI, you can have all these tools. Protein three-dimensional structure can be obtained from where you can also probe for presence of a receptor pocket. And after that, you can use this entire thing for virtual screening. Virtual screening is almost analogous, okay, similar to the in vitro, in vivo screenings that we are going to do normally in our pharmacology labs or biotechnology labs. Okay, so here, as I told you in the beginning, the 5,000 compounds which are supposed to be put through the preliminary screening, we are avoiding that preliminary screening by using virtual screening. So this is what we call it as a docking analysis, or virtual screening can also be done by using some of the mathematical formulae that we can get through structure activity relationship software tools, QSAR models. Okay. So here I am going to give you some examples of how we have done it. Okay. So here what we did is we have chosen one problem, that is tuberculosis. We wanted to discover a lead molecule, but we don't want to do much of synthetic chemistry. We don't want to do much of synthetic chemistry. We don't want to synthesize hundreds of molecules and screen it. It is not needed. So we have chosen a problem, means an enzyme which is essential for Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which was not explored earlier. Then we have opted for structure-based drug designing. We can also go for ligand-based drug designing, but we have opted for structure-based drug designing because we know the amino acid sequence of the protein. Then we got databases of compounds that are already there online. Some of the databases also get it from companies also. So they share their data. Like Drug Bank database, Oxford database is there, and many others are there. You can also prepare your own database, absolutely no problem. Then do the virtual screening. So here comes the term docking. Okay, so docking is Just like the example I gave you just now. I'll give you a chocolate, a small biscuit, and then a coconut. How can you decide which one can fit into your pocket? You are aware of the size of your pocket, and nobody would have a, no, a pocket which is large enough to accommodate a coconut, okay? But you have your own pocket. Now you know the structure of the pocket, how much space is available. Then you are screening in your brain which one you should keep in your pocket, which one you should keep in your bag, other bag, okay? It is shopping bag. It is like that. So in case of virtual screening, we are converting an organic compound structure into a three-dimensional model which a computer can understand. And the target protein, whatever we have chosen, that also we are going to convert that one into a model which can be understood by the computer. And also we define a mathematical formula which can be used for fitment score. Let's say if this is the pocket and if it has to fit, how best these two can associate with each other. Here we also tell the computer some of the mathematical formula, chemistry in terms of mathematical formula, like hydrogen bond formation, lipid-lipid interaction, van der Waals equations. All of them can be translated into mathematics easily. Then once the screening is done, a hit is a compound in a database which is appropriately fitting into the receptor pocket, and this receptor ligand complex is stabilized. So when two chemicals are coming together, they form intermolecular interactions. All these interactions are possible. So we summarize the ultimate internal energy of both these components, and then if it is on the negative side, delta G will be calculated. If it is less than zero, then there is a possibility of interaction between these two compounds. Modeling, mathematical formula, and this entire process is thoroughly validated, statistically evaluated. So that is the reason why we can depend right now on these type of models. Earlier, way back in before 2006, the success rate of computer-aided drug designing is less than 30%. It is almost like a routine drug screening process. People used to laugh at this as no chemistry persons no game, video game. It is like a video game. But later on, after 2008, all of you are aware of it, okay? Recently, the computer prices have gone down significantly with the entry of nanotechnology and automation. So many things have happened after 2008, so that the prices of computers have gone down significantly because of the availability of high quality computation, highly productive computational facilities, which is affordable. And then there is because that gave us an opportunity to improvise the programs also. Right now, earlier we have C, then C++ is there. Now C# language is there, okay? VC++, Python is there. And after that it is evolving, still evolving. This evolution is possible only because we have very good processors, which are affordable. When I was in my PhD, a computer like Windows basic version with I think 512 MB RAM, if I am not wrong, that costed me 36,000 rupees with the CRT monitor, cathode ray monitor. Now, right now, this generation does not know what is CRT monitor. All we have is LCD or LED monitors are there, and which are coming at a throwaway price of around 3,000 rupees or 4,000 rupees. And a very good computer assembled, if it is assembled, it is coming at 20,000 rupees. Okay, it doesn't matter. No, the prices have gone down significantly. So that gave us an opportunity to improvise everything so that the quality of output increased like anything. So here, right now, the success rate of computer-aided drug designing is more than 85%. 85% is superb. So that's the reason why every one of us, whether you are in Sutics, biotechnology, chemistry, analysis, it doesn't matter. In every field, computer entered and modeling is ruling the field right now. So that's the reason why these kind of approaches are very, very useful. Okay, so here, once you get a hit, uh, we do preliminary screening like in vitro screenings, etc. so that a lead molecule is obtained. A lead is like a drug molecule which is not fully explored. Okay, drug-like candidate. Then we validate it in vitro, in vivo, and then a drug-like candidate can be obtained. Okay, so with this, I'll go and enter into my research topic. So here, what we have taken is mycolic acid biosynthesis. I'll go to the next slide and I'll come back here. Usually in our body, in humans, FAS1 is the fatty acid synthesis system 1 will be there. FAS2 will be there in Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Okay, so in FAS2 it takes the inputs from FAS1 because here we can go up to C16 means palmitic acid. Up to palmitic acid we can synthesize. So this palmitic acid will be an input for FAS2 enzyme system, means fatty acid synthesis system. Okay, and then it will synthesize very long chain fatty acids. They are what we call them as mycolic acids. Okay, so I hope you have seen people in England right now during Christmas time. They wear a shirt, thermal, then another jacket, then on that another jacket, another jacket. Okay, it is like that. So this is the microbe. Mycobacterium tuberculosis will have a highly thick lipid-rich cell wall will be there. Highly thick lipid-rich cell wall will be there. Microbe is this much only, but it will have layers and layers and layers. A very thick lipid-rich cell wall will be there. So this is because of the mycolic acids, presence of mycolic acids. Mycolic acids are very long. So when they are very long, it will be suffocating. Okay, so how it is going to get the nutrients? It needs glucose, it may need oxygen, it may need amino acids, etc., etc. Then if all fatty acids are like this, what will happen? Usually when an oil is hydrogenated, what will happen? It will become dalda. Dalda is almost solid. Okay, if it is completely saturated, then it will be suffocating. It will suffocate to death. To avoid that one, there is a separate mechanism is there in Mycobacterium tuberculosis to functionalize. So in case of unsaturated fatty acids, you will have unsaturations. So there will be a nick. Okay, so it cannot align properly. So that's why it will remain liquid. So to maintain liquidity, to maintain the viscosity of the cell membrane, it needs to functionalize the mycolic acid. So here comes one enzyme, we call it as methyl mycolate enzyme. It is simply methyl transferase enzyme. And we were surprised to see that nobody has ever worked on this type of an enzyme earlier. Okay, because we don't want to pursue an enzyme which is already studied. That is the first one. The second one is it really needed by the enzyme, needed by the microbe? Let's say if we switch it off, then can it kill the microbe or not? Yes, of course. I gave you the logic right now. So if you are switching it off, then all the mycolic acids may remain either saturated or with the double bonds or pre-functionalized. Number of functionalities are going to go down. Then it will slowly choke the bacteria to death. Yes, then it will definitely be a very good enzyme target. Then we are convinced and then we wanted to go further. So here, sorry, I told you, okay, this is it. These are the mycolic acids. You can see very, very long chains. And here we can have cyclopropanes. They are like nicks. Okay, so if a fatty acid is like this, if a fatty acid is also like this, they will align properly so that it will become solid. If a nick is there, then there is no alignment. And it also is going to affect the remaining fatty acids alignment. So in that way, it will induce fluidity. Okay, so it is like that. I hope you understood the point here. So here, what are our objectives? We wanted to see because you need to have objectives, okay, for your study. MMA1 protein as a novel therapeutic agent, and we wanted to, because we don't have any three-dimensional structure for this, so we wanted to build the three-dimensional structure. We wanted to validate it. Then we will do in silico screening. Then check it whether it can be pursued further or not. Then go for lead optimization. We wanted to go to the end. Anti-TB activity also will be done. So to perform the three-dimensional structure prediction, because we don't have any. So here the first point is template selection, because we have amino acid sequence. What we don't have is the three-dimensional structure. So when similar proteins, if they are available in literature with the three-dimensional structure established, we can make use of that. So that is what we call it as the term, we use it as a template selection. We have online tools like UniProt and BLAST. These are the two tools we are going to use. After BLAST, it is going to align the sequence. Alignment, if it is really good, through Clustal W, we can use it. Then 3D model will be generated by using modeler software. Means here, what is it that we are doing? We are searching the database to select a template. Then we are using another tool to see sequence alignment. We are using another tool to generate three-dimensional model, and because the modeler software can do so many things to ultimately give you three-dimensional, dependable three-dimensional model. Why I'm using model here? Let's say when you are screening a drug for anti-inflammatory activity, you are choosing a rat as a model. You are not using humans, okay? Why are you using rats? Because there is some kind of a dependable result you are able to get. In the same way, if you can develop a computational model which is dependable, then obviously it will also give you the same kind of output as your in vitro or in vivo screening outputs. You need to always validate ProCheck, ProSA and Verify 3D. And then, so this is what we have done. We have gone through resources, so that we have chosen, UniProt. This is the amino acid sequence we got. And then BLAST P means protein screening. That is what we are doing. We need to simply keep it over here. You need to learn a little bit of basics about BLAST analysis. Then you can easily use it. Only thing that is needed is a computer, a little bit of knowledge and internet connection. Okay. Then once you do that, it is like Google result. When you search for my name, my publications or what we have done, all those things will come. Okay. In the same way, you have searched for a different kind of name. So you got it. So here we got some of the proteins which were earlier obtained and three-dimensional structures were made. So these are what we call them as templates. So here query cover 99% means similar to MMA1, some more enzymes are there in Mycobacterium like isozymes. We all knew that when COX1, COX2 is there in the same way. So here also we found some enzyme for which three-dimensional structure is available. Then, so the next is, this is alignment. Okay, then this is what we have explained. So here we use modeler software for the three-dimensional structure alignment. It is like this. We already knew the three-dimensional structure of a protein which has similarity with the query sequence. We have our own enzyme for which three-dimensional structure is not available. But in the literature, similar protein is there. It's not the same protein, similar protein is there for which three-dimensional structure is available. Now we wanted to check whether both with the help of three-dimensional model available, we wanted to align our amino acids, for which modeler is the software tool which is useful to us. So this is one of the output you can search, where you can see in the entire amino acid sequence we have, in which area you can have helical structure, in which area you can have a beta sheath, in which area you can have a straight like loop region can be there. So this can be easily obtained. So this is the final checked and verified and validated protein three-dimensional structure of our target enzyme. Okay, so this is what we have got. It is all these outputs are obtained from modeler software. So here, as I told you, it is a methyl transferase enzyme. Methyl transferase enzyme where S-adenosyl methionine is the cofactor. Substrate attachment happens over here. This is an established phenomenon because methyl transferase enzymes is a big family. In our body, so many will be there. So they will have the three-dimensional structure, especially at the active pocket, the amino acids will remain redundant. Okay, they are all fixed. The remaining amino acids may change, like COX-1 and COX-2 differ by only one amino acid. It is like that. So here we wanted to check the amino acids, like a three-dimensional structure is to be verified. Here we have Ramachandran plot analysis. It can be done also online, but you need to understand the regions. This is not allowed region where we don't want to see so many dots. Okay, no dots are allowed here. So fortunately, in the three-dimensional structure development, energy minimization, everything will be there. So modeler software takes care of many of the issues. So right now, the modeler software that is completely updated. So many of the problems it itself is solving. So the three-dimensional structure is almost dependable. So these are all some of the parameters we do for validating the enzyme. So this is like validating the three-dimensional structure. Okay, whether the structure is in the permissible limits. Okay, let's say amino acids are there, folds are there, there are angles, and the three-dimensional structure, is it in the admissible range or not? Because we have thousands of proteins are there, all their data are available, and now the database is translated into a server, so which can take the inputs from existing data and validate the test data. And this is the energy check. These are all the software tools we use for identifying the active site. As I told you, the active site can be obtained by using co-crystallization techniques. But here we are not doing that. But we are using some software tools for identifying the receptor pocket, because we do have some data on existing enzymes and their three-dimensional structure. Excuse me. Okay, existing structures. Now through these three servers, we have screened and then we got these data. Okay, so this is the region where active pocket can be there. So in identifying the active pocket, S-adenosyl methionine site will be identified, and also the catalytic site will also be identified. So once it is done, what we have to do, the virtual screening is to be done. How can you do virtual screening? First one is, we know the protein three-dimensional structure. Now you have to translate this one into a model which can be understood by the computer. So what we will tell, so this is the three-dimensional structure of the protein, topography, completely we will give. The next one is, in which area electron donating groups are there, in which area electron accepting groups are there, where aromatic rings are there, where exactly lipophilic region is there. Okay, this is what we will tell. And we also tell the computer that if some other compound with these defined properties is there, here we have hydrogen bond donor is there, here we have hydrogen bond acceptor is there. When you are able to physically move them together below van der Waals radius, within van der Waals radius, then there is a possibility of formation of hydrogen bonding. So when there is a possibility of formation of hydrogen bonding is there, the energy can be approximately 3 kilocalorie. So this is what we translate, 3 kilojoules. That is what we, kilocalories only. That is what we tell the computer. Okay. So first, it is a physical object. It will have its own empty spaces, etc. And you also have an organic compound in three-dimensional shape and size. And both are physically drawn together to see the fitment in a particular area which we have defined as the receptor pocket via grid generation. Okay, it is like this. Let's say if this is the protein, this is the receptor pocket, then we define the space like this as a grid, so that your computer will not look for interactions here or here or here. No, it will not do over here. It will search only over here. So a lot of time is saved. So here we can use any of the docking softwares which will suit your work. So here what we have done, we have taken the three-dimensional structure and we defined the receptor pocket. We have taken the databases that are commercially available or that are available, and then we have done the virtual screening. And we have here we used as many as 130,000 compounds, and we screened it, out of which 141 compounds were successfully are high scoring molecules we got. You can see this 130,000 compounds, out of which 141 compounds we have pre-screened. What is it that we are spending? We are spending no money here. Okay, if you have a software license, let's say Schrodinger or something like that, then you may be spending approximately 10 lakhs. Other than that, no more expenses. With that, you have screened 130,000 compounds. 130,000 into, let's say, 5,000. As I told you in the anti-inflammatory screening, you can imagine how much money you are saving. Okay, how much money you are saving. We got only 141 compounds. So we are confident that these 141 compounds, one among these 141 compounds is definitely going to show us a potent biological activity. Potent biological activity. So that confidence we are building because we know the efficiency of the software tools and our methodology. So these two are what is actually giving us this confidence of removing more than 130,000 compounds from the database. Okay, that is one. Second one is how much time it is taking. Approximately 1 day. Okay, maybe 3 days for the remaining work, means modeling, etc., etc. Provided you have a dedicated computer and you work on that regularly. Okay, maybe within 1 week time, all these things can be concluded. What is it that you are using? You are using a computer, a software, your brain. Okay, so that through that you are saving millions and millions of dollars, and you are also saving millions and millions of man hours. You are also saving animals. Okay, so you need not harass any animal to do all the crazy experiments. Okay, that is it. Now your job is to see if you can further reduce these 141 compounds. Okay, so from here you can even further screen it to reduce the number of hits. So we have done it, and I'm showing here some of the lead molecules we got which were never reported earlier for this particular biological activity, and their scores are really, really good. And from here we have chosen some of the compounds, and the docking interactions are pretty good, and their solubility, log p value, etc., etc., everything is falling within the Lipinski's rule of 5 or any other screening rules that we have in the drug discovery. So these are all the molecules we have. Their molecular weights are below 500 and they are druggable, among which we have chosen this single compound. We have chosen single compound. We wanted to check whether our objectives are fulfilled or not, because this is the top scoring molecule. It should have no biological activity, because this is not available. This is not, if this is available in the market, then we would have purchased it 10 milligrams or 20 milligrams and we would have finished the in vitro screenings altogether. Okay, let's say you spend 5,000 rupees for 10 milligrams. Okay, 100 times more costlier than gold or platinum. It doesn't matter. You are going to spend only 5,000 rupees to get this. 10 milligrams is enough. So because this is not available, so we have developed a synthetic methodology that is a routine process in our organic chemistry laboratory, Medichem laboratory, and we got it. We got the compound. And after that, we have screened it. We are not expecting wonders. We are not expecting wonders. But here what we observed is the compound has shown 100 microgram per ml biological activity. 100 microgram per ml. We were slightly disappointed. But we got our concepts correct, and our proof of concept has established that MMEA1 can be used as a drug target. And we got it published in Molecular Diversity. Let's say you don't have this CAD work, and what you have done is simply you have synthesized and screened for MTB work. Then journals will not accept it normally. Okay, you have synthesized only one compound and you have done screening, and you wanted to say that my compound has biological activity. Nobody would appreciate it. Okay, it is because our objective is backed by some scientific reasoning with the help of technical help from all the software tools and mathematical support. So this article is well appreciated and it got published. But we didn't stop here. So what we thought is like, why it is not showing biological activity? Even no, it is showing excellent docking score. Then we found like this compound is highly water soluble and slightly bigger in size. So maybe if we could remove one of the molecular entity from that without compromising the docking score. Okay, ligand efficiency is the parameter we are calculating here. Then what we did is we observed the activity profile for the starting materials also. So this starting material is found to have 25 microgram per ml, means 4 times more potent than the actual target molecule. Then what we thought is like, why don't we go for this small molecule and go ahead with the activity? Then, so we have chosen that, and we synthesized a series of molecules. Before going, if you see the structure, it is a very simple structure, okay? Meta-aminobenzoic acid, and here we have a glycine-like unit is there, and here amidation is to be done. A very simple molecule. Then which R you have to use? Which substituent you have to use? Can you synthesize any type of amine? No, it is not possible. It is not suggested. So what we have done is we have chosen some of the amines and then prepared a database and performed the docking. And then we got very good scoring for some of the molecules, like these substitutions. And then we have synthesized those chosen molecules. So these are the molecules which you have synthesized. We are heavily dependent on computational tools. We are heavily using computational screening protocols to reduce the number of compounds to be synthesized and increase our success rate. And you will be surprised. You can see this. See, if you see here, how many molecules we have synthesized? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 molecules, among which the last 3 are standard molecules. This is pyrazinamide, this is ciprofloxacin, this is streptomycin. In vitro results of standard molecules, they seems like smaller, but in vivo activity will be very big. But here for comparison, if you see here, among the compounds that we have synthesized, 14 compounds we have synthesized. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 compounds were shown to have superb activity. 1.6 is excellent. Double the potency than pyrazinamide and ciprofloxacin. We value pyrazinamide and ciprofloxacin because they are safe in human subjects. Okay, and they're also highly effective. Their regimens are finalized and time tested. That's why we value them. So here, probable drug candidates for uptime. So what is our success rate? If you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 compounds out of 14 is approximately 40% of the molecules have shown, approximately 40% of molecules have shown excellent biological activity. How many compounds we have synthesized? 14 compounds. And with these 14 compounds and docking results, we could get our article published in Bioorganic Medicinal Chemistry Letters. Those in the medicinal chemistry field know the standard of this journal. Let's say you had synthesized only 14 compounds and you have shown something like, okay, anti-TB activity, excellent activity is there, and if you send it, straight away it will be rejected. Straight away it will be rejected. But only when it is backed by the in silico screening methodology and some rational, strong rational support, which can give you an insight into the mechanism of action, then those works will be appreciated. Okay. So with this, we could get another publication. So these are the preliminary screening results. We also wanted to see if, let's say, if we convert this molecule into a drug, probably, then will it create any problem for our body, like hepatotoxicity, etc. So some of the screening protocols which are already established, available online, all are databases only. Through them, we have screened and we found all our potent molecules are safe. And none of these molecules were found to possess antibacterial and antifungal activity. None of them were shown to possess antibacterial and antifungal activity below 50 microgram per ml concentration. Why it happened like that? Though here it is 1.6 microgram per ml as the MIC, there even at 50 microgram per ml, it is not showing any kind of antibacterial activity. It is because the compounds are targeted at an enzyme which is exclusively present in Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So that is what is needed. If you take INH won't show any kind of activity in the bacteria, other bacteria or fungi, because it is inhibiting mycolic acid biosynthesis, which is present exclusively in Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So in principle, that is the way how you can score, how you can increase the value of your research work, increase the impact of your research work by using your logical thinking and support of computational tools. Okay, so there is always a scope for improvement. Nobody is inferior here. Only thing is you need to put your efforts, think positively, and go ahead with an appropriate logical approach. So to conclude our discussion, what we have done is we have done a case study. I'm showing that PhD work as a case study here, where in silico tools can be used successfully to identify novel enzymes as drug targets. Second one is, instead of high throughput screening techniques, you can also use virtual screening as a supplement, or sometimes to even replace HTS. To reduce attrition in the preliminary screening stage of identifying. Let's say if you are supposed to synthesize 5,000 molecules, then it will take a lot of time, money, etc., etc. And you have seen the statistics of success or failure. But in CAD, we have more than 80% success rate is there. Even if you see the results, the best active compound in, except these two, all the remaining are equal or less than, equal or more potent than the standard drugs. Means out of 14, only 2 compounds were not showing appreciable biological activity. What is the success rate? More than 90%. Okay, so that is the strength of computational tools. Reduce attrition rate and increase the rate at which and the speed at which you can identify a lead molecule. Lead molecule identification itself takes a huge time. It significantly reduces financial burden. Now, how much money we have spent on this work? We have spent closely 30,000 rupees, maybe less than that, because all the tools that we used, either we took the help or we took the help, especially in case of software, or we got it through internet only. Okay, so that's it. So that is the way how we have done. We have established that in silico tools are going to be immensely useful to us, especially doing computer-aided drug designing, especially in case of COVID. And if you click in Google, docking screening or preliminary screening or identification of lead molecules against COVID, during the COVID period, more than 500 different papers were appeared in the medicinal chemistry division in various journals. open source journals and other journals also. More than 500 articles appeared, which are showing some kind of promising results on drug repurposing, using other molecular scaffolds for inhibiting the spike protein, etc., etc. Even the vaccine development also. So there also they take a lot of help from bioinformatic tools. The amino acid sequence from the spike protein and other proteins that are present inside the uh, viral capsule or inside the virus, which have this antigenic property. While choosing that one, so much of computational or bioinformatic tools utilization happened. Okay, so friends, this is the right time, and I congratulate Bapatla College of Pharmacy and the team that are organizing this event for choosing a superb topic, a relevant topic, which is essential, which is very important